silence until it moves. At first, it's just absence. No birds, no whine, no engine ticking as it cools. But then it presses in, sinks into your skin like grit, starts to hum behind your eyes. That's the first thing I remember about Marrowbone, that damn silence. And how it felt wrong, like the land had sucked the sound out of the air on purpose. I wasn't there to chase ghosts. I don't believe in that crap, or I didn't back then. I was just supposed to be passing through. Quick job. Translate some old handwritten records found in a dry barn outside of town for a private historical foundation. Though that foundation's name changed on every piece of paper they gave me: Preservation Group, Cultural Recovery Initiative, Asset Survey Unit, Classic Shell Game. I'd done work like that before, usually ex-military or DARPA-affiliated spooks trying to sanitize old documents with too much blood in them. Didn't matter, they paid up front, double my usual rate, and I needed out of the city. So I drove 3 hours east from nowhere until the road lost interest and just stopped trying. Cracked blacktop gave way to salted dirt and sunburnt gravel. Then the land opened up, vast, pale, and indifferent. No trees, no curves, just bone-flat scrub, and those cliffs rising in the distance like a wall built by something ancient and angry. They call that part of the country the Hollows, though no one can agree why. The motel was a one-story corpse, peeling turquoise paint, Coke machine that buzzed like a hornet nest. No front desk, just a handwritten sign that said, "Check in, ring the bell." No refunds after room key handed, Maeve. The bell was wired to an actual cowbell, hung from a string over the door. When I tapped it, something clattered behind the beaded curtain. Maeve Drury came out barefoot, carrying a mug that said, "This coffee is stronger than your opinions." She was maybe late 40s, but sun age, face like weathered leather, bright eyes that didn't blink enough. "You Elias Keene?" she asked, voice flat. "Yeah, here for the archive materials. You'll be in room 4. Don't use room 5. Don't knock, that's storage." Beat. She stared at me too long, then added, "You'll hear things. Just ignore 'em. Pipes. Room for smelled like bull dust." The mattress dipped like it had a secret. I turned on the bathroom light, and for half a second I could swear the mirror reflected someone else standing behind me. Just a trick of the bulb. Flickered once. Came on steady. No one there. Still, I kept looking over my shoulder the rest of that night. That first evening I drove out to the archive site. Maeve gave me directions. Just a single turn off the main road, marked only by a leaning metal sign with the letters long since sandblasted off. The barn wasn't really a barn, not anymore. The roof had caved in decades ago. Inside, I found a ring of chairs around the fire pit, long cold, stacked milk crates full of notebooks, file folders, and a weird amount of religious pamphlets, most of them written by hand in blocky, awkward English. One pamphlet had a title that stuck with me, "His Word in Dust." The God beneath, I opened it at random. "We eat the book and become the mouth when the stone shakes. Kneel." He waits in the 7th seam. Some of the handwriting matched samples I'd seen in declassified documents from the 1970s. Mountain communes, Macultra cross-threads, marginalia that spiraled into symbols instead of sentences. I didn't say it aloud, but I thought it. What the hell kind of town is this? That night I had the first dream a cabin, old, windowless, snow pressed against the outside, not falling, just there, stuck in air like frozen static. I was inside, in the dark, couldn't move, couldn't breathe right. Something was scratching inside the walls. And then a voice, my voice, only wrong, whispered from somewhere behind my ribs. Don't look at the seams. I woke up to the smell of something burning. Not fire, not wood. More like charred sage, bitter and sharp. There was no smoke. The room was cold. I checked the hallway. Room 5's door was open just an inch, and someone, or something, whispered, "Keen," just once, right before the lights blew. I should have left the next morning. I packed the car, turned the key. The engine didn't turn over. Maeve just smiled from the porch, coffee in hand. "Battery's fine," she said, "but things don't leave real easy from here. Not if they've been touched." She didn't explain what that meant, just handed me a sandwich wrapped in wax paper. "You'll need strength tonight, and consistency so far. 1. Room 5 is said to be storage, but someone's inside. 2. Maeve refers to things not leaving if touched. Suggests local rules that aren't logical. 3. Archive documents contain real-world, classified handwriting patterns. 4. Elias's dream includes his own distorted voice, suggests internal breach or unreliability. 5. Subtle environmental shift, mirror reflection, burning smell, lights blowing. By noon, the heat hit biblical. No breeze, no insects, just the sound of my boots crunching on alkali soil as I headed back to the barn with a canteen and a notepad. A coyote stood on the ridge above the barn, not moving, watching, its head cocked slightly too far to one side, like a marionette with one string tighter than the rest. When I looked back a second later, it was gone, just a circle of flattened grass where it had been. I'd spent years training myself to notice patterns in language, loops, repetitions, embedded codes. But out here, it wasn't words that repeated. It was positions, shapes, the placement of things. The way the same 3 stones form the same triangle outside every building I visited. The way crows circled the same way every morning at 7:13. Above a boarded-up chapel by the cliffs, the townsfolk didn't talk much. If you asked questions, they either acted like they didn't hear you or they gave you this practice lopsided smile, like they were humoring a child who hadn't yet seen the thing in the cellar. I met the preacher on day 2. Jedediah Hask, 80 if he was a day, sat outside the abandoned post office on a broken stool, shelling pecans with thick, blackened fingers. I only stopped because I recognized the design carved into the bench next to him, a variation on a cipher I'd seen used in Mormon settlement journals from the 1880s, and again in CIA field reports from Argentina in 1974, a sunburst, with 7 lines, always 7, Dr. King, he said without being introduced. "You brought the hum with you, the ... hum." He nodded, smiling with no teeth. "It comes before he does, always has. But you don't know that yet. He will." I glanced at the bench again. The carving was gone, just a blank plank of weathered pine. When I turned back, Hask was still smiling. "Things change when you look away, son. That's the first lesson. Always has been." Later that evening, Mason showed up, young guy, tan jacket, full-frame camera, cheap mic clip to his collar. One of those YouTubers who tries to make ghost towns go viral. He said he was there doing a docuseries on forgotten American folklore, which sounded fake, but he seemed sincere enough. A little overeager, too curious for his own good. We shared a table at Moab's Diner, the only place that served food in town. I asked what brought him to Marrowbone. He laughed. Would you believe me if I said I found a hand-drawn map inside a hollowed-out Gideon Bible in a Salvation Army in Lubbock? No, didn't think so. He showed me the map anyway. Yellow paper, roots traced in faint pencil, the word Godmas circled in red ink near the cliffs. I didn't like the handwriting. It was too much like Leah's Night 2. Another dream. This time I'm standing in red dust. My hands are covered in it, like I've been digging. The horizon is all flat light and static. There's a woman in front of me, but her face is just smooth skin. No eyes, no mouth, just a hollow where something should be. I try to speak, I can't, my tongue's missing. She raises a mirror, I see myself, except my face is made of 7 seams. And then I wake up to the sound of whispering under my bed, not voices, not exactly. More like dot, 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 a memory of voices playing on a loop, too low to understand, too familiar to ignore. The archived documents get worse. Every file I translate unspools something uglier, a testimony from 1887 about the soft men of the range who came out of the salt flats at dusk and spoke backwards in perfect English. A school ledger from 1935 where all the children's names are crossed out, except one, written 7 times, Isaac Bell. A series of pages written in what looks like glossolalia, except the same nonsense phrase appears in every paragraph, eater of stone. The pages smell wrong, like the ash from a burned church. I found that smell again in room 5. Its door was closed that night, but when I walked past I heard breathing. Heavy and even I knocked, it stopped. I should have laughed, should have packed up, hot-wired my own damn car if I had to, and driven west until the cliffs disappeared in the mirror. But then I found her name, Leah, written in the margins of a transcript from 1976, circled in red. Subject LK displayed response to sound pattern SEAM7. Transfer to Marrowbone pending. I dropped the page. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. That night I went back to the barn alone. There was a hole dug in the center of the fire pit. Fresh dirt, still loose, a brass tobacco tin sat at the bottom. I picked it up. It was warm. On the lid, 7 lines radiating from a single black point. Inside, a strip of parchment, written in what looked like Cherokee syllabary, but corrupted, bent, twisted just enough to suggest a word I hadn't heard in years. Tsoraha, but the ink moved as I looked at it. Letters unwriting themselves, I dropped the tin. The hum started again, low, like a dead throat trying to speak. And somewhere out in the salt, something answered it. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in room with the lights on, not reading, not writing, just dot, 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 waiting. For what I didn't know. At 3:17 a.m., every light in the motel flickered once and died. Silence again, not the peaceful kind. The kind that listens back. I stepped out into the hallway. Room 5's door was open. Not cracked this time. Open. No light inside. I stood there, not moving, not even breathing. Then a sound. Not footsteps, just dragging, like something pulling itself across the floor, wet, rhythmic. I whispered, "Maeve." The dragging stopped. A beat. Then something whispered back. Same voice, same tone. Like a perfect echo warped by distance. "Maeve." I ran. Outside, the sky was the color of old bruises. That strange half-moon, pinned unnaturally high like it had been nailed there. The wind had picked up, finally, but it blew up from the ground, full of dust and static. My teeth buzzed. At the edge of the parking lot, Jedediah Hask stood barefoot, wearing only a preacher's stole. He was holding a dead coyote. Not cradling, holding. One hand gripped its snout, the other held its tail. He looked at me and grinned wide, gums like dried blood. "It's starting, Dr. King," he said. "You feel it, don't you, in your marrow?" I opened my mouth to ask what the hell he meant, but the coyote blinked. Its eyes were human. Mine. The next morning, Mason knocked on my door. He hadn't slept either. "I heard something last night," he said. "Out past the ridge, like a tunnel under the ground, breathing." He showed me a photo he'd taken just after dusk. The salt flat behind the cliffs looked normal at first, until you noticed the figures. 7 shadows, elongated to tall, too thin, standing in a semicircle, each one pointing at something that wasn't in the frame. Each one headless. Mason didn't seem afraid. He seemed exhilarated. That scared me more than anything else. I walked to the archive site again. The triangle of stones outside had changed. Now it pointed west. Inside, the milk crates were gone. In their place was a wooden box, carved with the same sunburst pattern. 7 lines, 1 black point. Inside the box, an old reel-to-reel recorder and a single cassette, labeled read, Hollow Range, Session 1. Play only on site. I stared at it for a long time, then I heard it, the hum. Not just in the air this time, in my head, in the language center of my brain, like it was rewriting something I hadn't meant to give up. I took the tape and ran. That night I made my decision. I wasn't just going to translate the records. I was going to find out what happened to Leah, why this place was in her files, why it had her handwriting, why it felt like my bones already knew it. I unpacked everything, set up a workstation, made a timeline, sorted documents by symbol clusters, matching them against known native syllabaries and colonial law books. The same for words kept surfacing in different tongues, different centuries, seam eater, godmouth, inheritance. I wrote them down, underlined them, and when I did, the light bulb above my head shattered. Without sound, just blink. Gone outside. I heard it, that hum again. But this time, it was singing, no melody, just syllables, spoken in that same wrong cadence. Like an old tape playing backward at half speed, I stepped out into the dust. The cliffs were glowing, faint, just a shimmer, but unmistakable, like something behind them was moving, or waking, or remembering. I opened the tobacco tin again. The parchment inside had changed. Now it held a photograph, black and white, faded, stained. 7 people stood on a ridge, hands clasped, no faces, and behind them, in the distance, Leah standing alone, staring at the camera, wearing the same clothes she disappeared in, smiling, and behind her a shadow, 7 arms, one face, mine. They say language is a mirror. You look into it long enough, you stop seeing the face behind the words. You just see the cracks, the distortions, the reflections of reflections. That's what started happening by day 3. Not just in the texts, in the town, in my memory, like something was mimicking reality with a half-second delay. The post office changed. I went back, same time as before. Jedediah wasn't there, the stool was, but now it had 4 legs again. Yesterday it had 3. I remembered counting. There was a mailbox on the far side of the building that hadn't been there the first time, rusted hinges fused. I pried it open. Inside, a page torn from a composition book. Old, smelled of wet paper and something worse, copper and vinegar. One line scrawled in crooked block letters. She took the 7th name. We buried her standing. No signature, just a smear of what I hoped was ink. Back at the motel, Mason was reviewing footage from his ridge trip. He waved me over. "You need to see this," he said, teeth tight. It was the same clip from before, the salt flat, the shadows. But he'd enhanced the contrast, slowed it down, and now I saw it. The shadows didn't move like camera artifacts. They shifted positions between frames, subtly, impossibly, pointing to different parts of the flat, coordinated, deliberate, worse. In the 3rd frame, one of the shadows was closer to the camera. I didn't move. Mason whispered, "I swear," but something stepped toward me. I paused the video. Behind the frame, a faint shape in the salt, almost erased by overexposure. A triangle, 3 stones, just like the ones outside every building in town. Except now I realized the triangle wasn't outside the frame. It was beneath him. The motel radio clicked on that night. No music, no static, just a voice, mechanical and slow. Session resume. Seem integrity failing. Prepare subject for auditory ingestion. I yanked the plug from the wall. The radio stayed on. Then it spoke again. But this time it used my voice. Not a recording, my voice, saying something I never remembered saying. The language was never meant to be read. It's not syntax. It's invitation. And then silence. My relationship with Maeve shifted. She grew colder, more evasive, still polite, but too polite, the way someone's careful around a wounded animal. At breakfast, she set down a plate and said, "Just stay away from the chapel. It's never safe when it sings." Then she walked away without looking back. Later that day, I saw her in the alley behind the diner, standing perfectly still, facing the wall, mumbling something under her breath. She didn't blink the whole time I called her name. She didn't move. Then, without turning, she whispered, "You shouldn't remember her. That's how they get in." When I blinked, she was gone. I started blacking out for short periods. One moment I'd be translating documents. The next, I'd be standing in the middle of the salt flat, hands raw, dirt under my nails. Twice I woke up with the tobacco tin in my hand. Oh, I'd hidden it under lock and key. The parchment inside kept changing. New phrases each time. She's not dead. The salt doesn't forgive. The seam knows your name. And once, just one word, Keen. Mason wanted to explore the cliffs. Said he'd found a path behind the chapel that led to something carved into the rock face. I told him not to. He laughed. "You think we're cursed or something." I didn't answer. That's when I noticed it. a dark smear on his neck just beneath the collar, a mark that looked like 7 tally strokes, thin, faint, almost healed. "Did you cut yourself?" He looked confused. "What are you talking about?" He went to the mirror. There was nothing there, but when I looked again later, it was back. That night I dreamed of the underground table again. Same place, same chairs, same animal skulls. But this time I wasn't a guest, I was the main course, strapped to the table, jaw clamped open, the figures chanting in that warped Cherokee dialect. Except the words were mine. My notes, my translations, played back in a voice that sounded like Leah's, and just before I woke up, one of the skulls leaned close and whispered, "You opened the 7th scene, the town started to rot. Weather shifted fast, sudden dry lightning, no clouds, buildings buckled. One morning, the chapel steeple had collapsed like it had been struck from within. The triangle of stones outside every house, they started appearing inside, too, under beds, behind doors, in my bathroom sink. Each time arranged slightly differently, each time ... pointing at me. One set of documents. A series of faded telegrams between Bureau of Indian Affairs officials in the 1930s. Mentioned an unauthorized relocation of unnamed cultural artifacts and anomalous person to an unmarked location near Devil's Bluff, a feature not on any map I could find. Each message ended with the same code word, Seamlock, buried in the footnotes of one memo. Subject Bell. Keen moved with package 7. Memory audit scheduled. I felt like vomiting. Mason told me the town used to be a healing place, said early frontier folk came here to cleanse themselves of grief. At the cliffs echoed certain sounds that brought peace, some kind of natural therapy. Maeve, on the other hand, called the land a wound, a place the world forgot to cauterize. She said, "It just keeps bleeding, and we keep drinking." Jedediah, he just smiled and said this town was never built. It was revealed. One morning, I woke up and found my notes written in a hand I didn't recognize, rough, feverish, but signed with my name. In the margins, sketches of Leah's face, warped into geometric shapes. That same day, I caught my reflection blinking out of sync, and when I walked past room 5, I saw a figure standing just behind the curtain, not human, just the outline of a man, stitched from shadow and salt. It rained the next day, or maybe the cliffs wept. Water didn't fall. It seeped from the sky in strings, thick and slow, smelling of iron and rot. The locals stayed inside. Even Maeve closed the diner without warning. A handwritten sign appeared on the door. "Rain means the seam is listening. Stay silent." I should have felt trapped, but something in me recognized this. The red dirt, the smell of sage turned sour. The shape of those damn cliffs, like I'd been here before. Not recently, not in this life. The box I kept locked under the motel bed, the one holding the reel-to-reel recorder and the rotating documents, had something new in it. A manila envelope, sealed with twine. Inside, photocopies of military field reports. Stamped eyes only OPSEAM 7. No context. No sender. The most intact document was a psych profile. Subject, L. Keen. Classification, Type 3 Convergent Vessel. Summary, pattern compatible. Recurring dream state synchronicity. Refuses auditory prompt SEAM 3. exhibits pre-contact linguistic retention, immune to sensory degradation. Recommendation: transfer to marrow bone site, monitor for breach phase, memory wash pending. At the bottom, handwritten in black ink. If she remembers the stories, the seam opens. I'd dropped the file. Something about the word remembers made my head throb. Made something behind my left eye twitch. Like a buried memory trying to claw its way back. The tobacco tin was waiting for me on the pillow. I hadn't brought it in. I opened it. Inside was no parchment this time. Just a black and white photograph. Leah again, this time crouched in the salt flats, drawing something in the dirt. A symbol. 7 lines radiating out from a black point. But this time, a new word scrolled across the photos back in childlike handwriting. You left me here. I waited until dusk. The chapel, half collapsed, split down the center, looked more like a cracked tooth than a church. Inside, the pews were warped, the cross had fallen and splintered. There was a pulpit made of stone, and carved into the wall behind it, half hidden by soot. Not English, not Cherokee, not Latin. It felt like a word, but wrong, like a language that grew underneath language. In the corner, behind a rusted stove, I found a bundle wrapped in deerskin. Inside, a small braid of black hair tied with red thread. A child's drawing of the cliffs, with a smiling sun above it, a wooden figure, crude, almost melted looking, the 7 notches on its chest. At the bottom, written in pencil, the scene takes the 7th one. Always the 7th, the long table again, only this time it wasn't underground. It was in the chapel, same animal skulls, same dead silence. But now Leah sat at the head of the table. She looked older, paler, her mouth moved, but no sound came. In front of her was the wooden figure. She dipped it into something dark, blood or ink, I couldn't tell, and pressed it into a page. I woke up gasping, the shape of the figure still pressed behind my eyes like an afterimage. When I looked at my hands, they were stained with something dark. The next day, I went to see Jedediah again. He was waiting. You're not the first keen to come here, he said before I asked anything. You were born with a listening mind. The seam smells that it remembers who forgets. I asked him what the seam really was. He laughed low and cracked. It's what's under all this. Under words, under land, under names. Some call it Godmouth, others call it the silence that waits. But it ain't a place, it's an understanding. I asked why Leah's name was in those files. His face went flat. She remembered too young. She dreamed backwards. They tried to seal it in her. But the scene don't forget. Dr. Keene. It just waits for blood it recognizes. He handed me a leather pouch. Inside, crushed sage, a string of red beads, and a folded scrap of high, a hand-drawn map, the cliffs, the salt flats, and one word scrawled in red, Hallowbirth. Pieces began falling into place, not cleanly, not logically, but emotionally, like my bones were remembering what my brain denied. I began writing things I didn't recall learning, lifts, phrases, notes in a language that only revealed its meaning in dreams, and always the same motif, 7 seams, 1 wound. The seam wasn't just an event, it was an inheritance, a story passed through blood, through forgetting. And Leah, she'd become part of the story, or worse. The seam had made her its voice. At dusk, I left the motel to find the post office again. But this time it wasn't there, just an empty lot, freshly salted, like nothing had ever stood there. I asked Maeve. She blinked twice, confused. "We don't have a post office, hon. Haven't since the fire. That was 20 years ago." I told her I'd been inside 2 days ago. Sat on the bench, talked to Jedediah. She shook her head slowly. "Jedediah passed in 99. You must have met someone else." Then she turned around, walked back inside, and locked the door. That night the humming started again, but it wasn't distant this time. It came from under the bed, rhythmic dot, wet. And then, just before I blacked out, a breath at my ear and Leah's voice, quiet, loving, final. "It's your turn now." I stopped writing in chronological order. My notebook became a sprawl of fragments, sketches, single words scratched into margins like warnings or incantations. Days bled into nights without borders. Sleep stopped being rest. It was a door I couldn't stop opening, even when I knew what waited on the other side. I stood brushing my teeth when I noticed it. The mirror was fogged over, but not from steam. From breath it pulsed in and out, slow, steady, like the glass itself was alive. I wrote in the fog with one finger, "Who are you?" The mirror answered, stroke by stroke, like an invisible finger writing back, "Leah." Then, "Don't trust your memories." I went to his room around noon. Door cracked, no answer. Inside, camera gear on the bed, back half-backed, TV on loop, paused on a still from his rich footage. Same shadows, same triangle, only now a new detail. In the corner of the frame, half in shadow, someone watching him, back turned, arms hanging wrong. When I zoomed in, the figure had no shadow and no face, just a hollow that looked like a face if you stared too long. The walls began humming again. That evening I took a walk to clear my head. The post office was back, just standing there like it had never left. Bench in front, empty stool, same carved cipher, though this time it pulsed faintly like heat mirage. On the door, a taped photograph, blurry, grayscale, looked like it had been taken through glass. It showed me asleep. In room 4, mouth open, eyes wide, hands folded neatly on my chest. I recorded a message on my phone, trying to make sense of what was happening. The playback, garbled, but underneath my voice, layered perfectly. Elias Keene, scene touched, crossed threshold 3. Then, clearly in Leah's voice, "You should have let me stay dead." I went back to Jedediah's pouch, the one with the map. On the back, written faintly in ink I hadn't noticed before, "Godmouth is not a name, it is a verb, to be swallowed by the land, to be used." That word, used, hit something deep in me, something primal. All my research, all my rationalization, gone in that moment, because that's what the scene did. It didn't possess, it employed. It made your life part of the narrative. Leah had become a sentence, a phrase used by the land, and I was next. Maeve finally talked, but not to warn me. She came to my room, eyes wide, hands shaking. "They're walking tonight," she whispered. "The seam walkers, that's what the dreams mean." I asked who they were. She looked at me like a child asking why the sky bleeds at dusk. "They're the ones who weren't buried right, the ones who remembered too well. When the land remembers you back, it wants to keep you whole." Then she left, Outside, the motel sign flickered, and the reflection of my window, I saw them. 7 figures, not walking, gliding straight toward room 4. I'm in the chapel. It's empty. I walk down the center aisle. Leah stands at the altar. She's wearing my old coat. Face calm, she says, "You never looked at the 7th page." I reach into my pocket, pull out the tobacco tin, open it. Inside, a mirror. I look into it and see myself at 7 years old. Face covered in blood, smiling. Then I wake to screaming, but it's coming from my mouth, and I don't remember starting. 3 things happened the next day that broke me. 1. I found a journal entry in my own handwriting, dated 3 days into the future. She comes at dusk. Don't open the door. You'll think it's Mason. It isn't. 2. The triangle of stones appeared on my chest when I woke up, impressed into the skin. Not tattooed, just dot, dot, dot there, as if I'd slept beneath them. 3. Room 5 opened again. This time I went in. Inside, nothing but mirrors, dozens, floor to ceiling, all reflecting different versions of me, some smiling, some weeping, one pounding on the glass, mouthing the words. Get out, I ran. I don't remember reaching the door. I just remember the sound, a low, wet hum, vibrating up from the soles of my feet, and the smell, burnt sage and rusted salt. That night I lay down. I didn't sleep, couldn't. The shadows on my wall moved independently of me. At 3:17 a.m., always 3:17, I heard a knock, 3 soft taps. I didn't move. The air smelled like blood in a tin can. Then a voice from the hallway, "Elias, it's me." I remember inward. To me, it was never just a town. That's what I kept telling myself, like a mantra scratched on the inside of my skull. Marrowbone wasn't a town. It was a containment site. And the closer I got to understanding that, the more things stopped obeying the rules of place and time. I finally played the reel-to-reel tape. I did it inside the archive barn, the only place where the humming seemed to stop for a few minutes at a time. The voice was male, calm, military-trained, the way people talk when they've seen something they can't name and still need to sound like it's fine. Redacted, Scene 7 Field Report, timestamp 0-6-40. Subject Keen remains unaware of latent trigger phrase. Test iteration 11 failed. Auditory loop produced disassociation, but no rupture. Recommend escalation. Pause. She remembers more in sleep than when conscious. She speaks names that shouldn't exist anymore, names that were never hers. We tried the erasure protocol. We thought it worked. But the land doesn't forget. The land writes back. I found her name again, carved, not written, into the base of the chapel's stone pulpit, under the moss, under the soot. Leah Keen, intake 7, retained, not recovered, not lost, held. There were 7 names below hers, each scratched over, erased with shallow claw marks. But Leah's was untouched. Hidden among the SEAM 7 docs was a single sheet from the 1970s. Burned at the edges, blacked out, lines bleeding through like blood under a bandage. Subject matter appears to manifest. Autolinguistic recursion. Symbols create perception shifts. Secondary exposure results in high potential altered cognition in latent sensitive subjects. Language as trigger, language as containment. Folkloric structures deployed successfully. Local cooperation remains unstable. Subject Alkene shows both transmission and resistance. Retain on site. I reread the phrase. Language is containment. That's what this town was. A story designed to hold something in. And my sister was the period at the end of the sentence. Maeve, shaken now, passed me a wooden object she swore hadn't been there before. Said it was left outside her door after the rain. It looked like a crude puzzle box, seamless, heavy. She called it a listening box. Said it only opened for those who had crossed a name. Inside, a set of bone tiles, each carved with a sigil I couldn't decipher, but my gut recognized, same ones I'd seen in the tobacco tin parchment when I was too tired to fight the dreams. There were 7 tiles, the 7th one, Leah's name, misspelled but unmistakable, L-I-A-K-E-N. I held it in my palm. The hum started again. Only this time, I wasn't afraid. I understood it. It wasn't a warning. It was a prompt. I took over the barn, spread everything out, built timelines, connections. SEAM7 wasn't just a file name. It was a ritual. 7 steps, 7 subjects, 7 seams to stitch the land close around something beneath it. Each subject was a conduit, a translator, not of language, but of presence. You don't read the seam, you become it. That's what they used Leah for, not as a vessel, as a syllable, or at least something wearing his face. He walked into the barn at dusk, barefoot, skin pale, eyes to why. Where did you go? I asked. I never left, he said. His voice echoed, like it bounced off something deeper than the walls. He sat down across from me, laid out 3 stones in a triangle on the table. Mason, you're bleeding. He smiled. No, he said, you're remembering. And then he stood, walked out, and left bloody footprints that didn't lead anywhere. Desperate, I tracked down Sheriff Bell. His house was boarded from the inside, heavy locks, religious charms on every window, but not Christian. Older, more angular, he let me in. Didn't speak for a long time. Just poured 2 glasses of rye and set one in front of me. I told them not to bring her back here, he said finally. Told them she wasn't clean, but they needed a 7th. She was ... aligned. Aligned how? She heard the words the first time. Most people don't hear them until it's too late. I pushed him. Aligned to what? He leaned forward, lowered his voice to a whisper. The godmouth, the thing that speaks under the land, the thing that eats silence and bleeds stories. And once you speak it ... once you write it down ... He tapped my notebook ... you belong to it. Later that night I opened my notebook. My handwriting was different, angular, sharper, like someone was shaping the letters with a knife. A passage I didn't remember writing. You are the 8th. The seam has been breached. Closure is no longer possible in just the name. Become the grammar of the wound. I flipped the page underneath. A sketch of my own face, mouth open, stitched shut under it. SEAM8 initiated. Outside the cliffs echoed. Not sound, words. My name, spoken in Leah's voice, repeated over and over, fractured through rock and salt. I looked at my watch. 3:17 a.m., always 3:17, and then a whisper inside my skull. You weren't sent here to translate. You were sent here to finish the sentence. They told me once. during a psych eval after a debriefing in Kandahar, that reality is only real if you agree with it, if the signals match the memory, if the pattern stays put. Tut out here, the pattern moves, and I started to understand that the scene doesn't haunt you. It doesn't chase you, it waits until you start speaking its language. I followed the map Jedediah gave me, Hollowburg. It wasn't a place on a map. It was a shape carved into the cliffside, hidden beneath a false overhang that looked like part of the natural stone. A triangle again, but this one big enough to crawl through. Inside, the air was wet, salt-heavy still. The hum wasn't behind my ears anymore. It was inside my skull, like a dial being turned too slowly to hear, but too fast to ignore. The path led downward, spiraling through a limestone throat. No torches, no lanterns, just a faint glow from the walls. Veins of some mineral I didn't recognize, pulsing like blood behind translucent skin. After maybe 20 minutes or an hour, I'd lost time again. I reached the chamber. I thought I was alone. Then I heard Leah's voice, whispering from the stone. It doesn't speak in words, it speaks in rules. 7 pedestals, each with a name carved into it. Most eroded to nothing. One was freshly carved, Elias Keene. At the center, a well, dry and cracked, lined with symbols, the same from the listening box tiles. A presence surrounded it, not visible, just a sensation of dot awareness, like standing in a room with someone asleep, except you know they're about to wake up. On the wall, 7 phrases in different languages, each one translated into another. Most were wrong, but the last one, in Cherokee, was the closest. The mouth of God does not speak, it translates. And then something moved in the well, a reflection, my reflection. Only it didn't move when I did. It smiled first. I returned to Marrowbone just before dawn. Or maybe it was dusk. Everything was wrong. The motel had burned. No smoke, just char. As if it had always been that way. Maeve stood outside, staring at nothing, eyes bleeding from the corners. They're not memories, she whispered. They're rehearsals. You're practicing what the land needs you to say. Then she collapsed. I ran to help her, but when I touched her shoulder, she turned to salt, just crumbled, like she'd never been alive. Back in the barn, I tried to record a message to myself, anything to anchor reality. Instead, the tape played back a voice I didn't recognize. You are now riding inward. The 7th vessel failed. You are the 8th. The seam is open. Containment is no longer viable. Then Leah's voice cut through. You found me. Now finish what they started. I threw the recorder. It landed next to the tobacco tin. The lid had reopened. Inside, a new page, a single line. I remember the language of the dirt. I dreamt again, or didn't. It felt too real this time. I was back in our childhood home. Kitchen light flickering. Dad's voice shouting upstairs. Leah sitting at the table, bleeding from the nose. She looked up at me and said, "They buried me standing because I didn't kneel." I asked her who they were. She said nothing, just reached into her chest, yes, into, and pulled out a strip of leather, carved into it. Our family name, only it had too many letters. And the last letter moved. When I blinked, I woke up, hands around my own throat. Nails digging deep. I wasn't choking myself. I was trying to open my neck. I began to realize the seam isn't a place. It's a way of thinking. It's the moment your brain starts to recognize that language can be a trap, that if you say a thing the wrong way, it changes you. If you read the story out of order, the story writes back, and I had said too much, thought too much, translated too far. I was part of it now. He was waiting by the chapel, same place, same stool. Only he was dead now, that much was obvious. Skin slack, lips purple, eyes clouded, but still breathing. Barely, you're too late, he rasped. They've already written the ending. I asked him who they were. He laughed, blood foam. The 7 that listened. I asked what they were listening for. He smiled, the final vowel. Time no longer track, watches broke. The sun set and rose in minutes. The townspeople walked in circles. The same dog barked every 12 minutes, and room 5, which no longer existed, appeared again, the door wide open. Inside, a tape recorder playing one phrase on loop. Your voice is a key. Open the well. I stood at the edge of the cliffs. Tobacco tin in hand, Leah stood beside me, or someone wearing her voice. She didn't look at me, just said, finish it, Elias, say the words. The seam needs grammar. You are the last clause. I looked down into the salt. It opened like a mouth waiting. There are no stairs in the salt, no footholds, no ropes. Just a gradual surrender. You lean forward and you keep falling, and you don't stop because you were always meant to go down. That's what Leah told me, or the voice pretending to be her. She said the descent isn't physical, it's grammatical. It wasn't a cave, it wasn't a tunnel, it was ... negative space, a subtraction in the land. The walls pulsed, but they weren't alive, just aware, like they were holding their breath, waiting to hear what I'd say. The deeper I went, the quieter it got. Even the hum disappeared. All I could hear was my own thoughts, but not in my voice, and not my thoughts. They came structured, already punctuated, perfect syntax. Like a machine had generated them from a story I hadn't written yet. Subject descends, subject offers, seam accepts. No lights, no sounds, just the pressure, and then breath, not air, not wind, just ... breath, hot and wet and massive, coming from every direction. I step into the chamber, and it saw me. Or it became aware that I saw it. Same thing, the walls blinked. Not metaphorically, not poetically, they blinked. 7 slits in the stone, opening and closing in rhythm. Each one exhaled a different name. I recognize some, not from memory, from blood, names my family had buried, erased, forgotten. And the last name whispered from the walls. Elias, only it wasn't spoken like a name. It was spoken like a command, a stone table, circular. Symbols burned into the top. 7 again. This time 1 symbol was missing. The 8th, I reached into my pocket, the listening box tile. The one with Leah's miswritten name, Liakin. It fit the empty space perfectly. As soon as it clicked into place, the room changed, not the walls, the grammar, the structure of the place, the logic of the space. I wasn't underground anymore. I was back in our childhood kitchen, and Leah stood at the stove, humming a song I remembered from nowhere. I tried to speak, but my voice didn't work. Instead, the room responded for me. Subject has been written. Leah set down a plate of blooded ash, smiled, and said, "They told you were here to translate." But you're the final vowel. I tried to remember how many people were in my family. Couldn't try to remember if I'd ever really left the town as a child. Didn't know. Tried to remember if Leah had ever existed outside of dreams. Nothing. And she said, "The seam isn't a curse, it's a sentence." And I was the period. The room fell away. I was floating or buried or unwritten, and then it spoke. Not in a voice and structure. I felt it in my spine, in the way my memories started rearranging themselves, as if my life had always been arranged around this single moment, as if everything before was a preface. The godmouth whispered, "Grammar of the land is blood. Mouths are made to echo, speak the ending," and I finally understood what Leah meant. We weren't supposed to survive. We were supposed to complete the ritual, to make the land whole again. When I woke, I was in the salt again, alone, covered in glyphs I hadn't written, carved into my forearms, my chest. Each one pulsed faintly, like heat signatures. I crawled out. The cliffs had changed, taller now, closer. No sky, the town gone, just empty structures. And one figure standing where the chapel had been, Leah, or a version of her. Same coat, same face, only her eyes were missing, just empty sockets filled with light. She didn't speak, just handed me a notebook. I opened it. My name was on every page, but spelled differently each time. Elias, Ilis, Elish, Elias, final vowel pending. The ground began to shake, not violently, rhythmically, a heartbeat, and then spoken through the cliffs, through the salt, through me. "He is ready. The seam will hold. The sentence is sealed. They say you die twice, once when your body gives out, once when your name is said for the last time. But no one warns you about the third death, the one that happens when your name gets rewritten." I wasn't Elias Keene anymore, not entirely, not only. I don't remember writing in it, but the notebook in my hands was full, front to back, each page scrawled in looping script, margins stained with salt and rust. Some of it I recognized, childhood stories, memories of Leah, things only I should have known, but other entries were impossible. June 17th, 1887. Subject, number to fail, to harmonize, reburied standing, as per the covenant. Seam vibrates, we wait for the next name. October 3rd, 1934, the girl speaks when she sleeps. Her tongue forms words we dare not translate. The salt absorbs, she must be kept quiet. August 12th, 1976. Subject, Keene absorbed, seam 6 memory print. Resists, phase 3 harmonics, recommending familial transfer. Brother remains latent. Brother, me. They planned this long before I was born. Leah was a placeholder. I was the period. The town was eroding, not just physically, conceptually. Buildings flickered, roads looped in on themselves. I watched the motel collapse and rebuild in reverse, the smoke curling downward into chimneys. People walked in patterns, repeated conversations, glitched mid-step like corrupted data. Sheriff Bell stood at the gas station for 6 straight hours, staring at an empty map. When I approached, he turned to me slowly. Eyes blank, he whispered, "It's almost here. You hear it? Don't you?" I asked him what he said. The past tense. The long table again, only now I was seated at the head. Leah stood behind me, both hands resting on my shoulders. Gentle, proud, 7 figures sat across from me. Their faces were all versions of mine, younger, older, decayed, burned. One wore military fatigues. One had no eyes. One was still screaming. I tried to stand. Leah pushed me down. "You're the clause that ends the sentence," she said. "Don't resist. Let the godmouth speak." I looked down. In front of me, carved into the table, Elias Keene. Final Lexeme, I found him again, or something using his skin, pinned to the chapel wall by 7 rusted nails, each one humming. He blinked, alive or close enough. He didn't speak at first, just looked at me with eyes full of pity. "Then you think this is about you? This is about what you represent. The world can't hold unspoken things forever. We built this place to keep the word quiet, to trap the name." I asked him what the name was. He shook his head once. "It doesn't translate." Then he whispered, "Don't say it," and began to rot from the inside out, still breathing, still staring. I stopped hearing her voice. I started thinking in it. My memories became hers, but distorted, like a mirror held too close to the flame. I remembered hiding in the crawl space. I remembered the first time the hum started. Not in Marrowbone, but in our childhood bedroom. I remembered writing things I didn't understand, burying them in a tin beneath the apple tree. I remembered watching Elias sleep. I remembered being Elias, and I remembered choosing to stay behind, to be used, to become the phrase that binds. I returned to the cliffs. The path had changed. No spiral now, just a straight descent. A grammatical correction at the bottom, the well. Dry as before, now cracked open. Inside, a heart still beating, made of salt and root and bone, and above it, written on the stone in ash, the word must end with him, and below that, carved in 7 scripts, the seam holds until the speaker dies. That's why I was here, to die, to end the story, to seal the name. I walked back into town. No people, no light, just whispers in the air. I stood in the center of Main Street, and the land spoke through me, not with words, with grammar, with silence, with the awful tension of a sentence that's almost over, the moment before the final period. Then Leah's voice echoed from the cliffs, "Say it, say the name," and the air went still, waiting. I didn't say the name. Not yet. I opened my mouth. The air was thick, not like breathing smoke or water, but like trying to speak through memory. Every syllable felt like a step off a ledge. So I stopped, and that hesitation, that moment, was when he returned. I found him waiting in the barn, sitting in the exact spot where I'd first seen the triangle of stones. Except this time the triangle was upside down. Mason looked normal, sweaty, dust-covered, shaking, not like the mirror thing that had worn his voice before. "Jesus, Elias," he said, "they took me, they split me. Something inside those cliffs. It wants a story, but not a true one. Not what happened. It wants a story it can wear." I asked him how he got out. He laughed. "I didn't. I think I'm just residual, an echo. But I came back to warn you." "Warn me about what?" He leaned forward. Leah never existed. I didn't answer. Couldn't, because the moment he said it, part of me agreed. Not logically, not emotionally, but structurally. Something in the deep grammar of my memory bent, like an old joist finally giving way. Flashes hit me, hard. A childhood bedroom with only one bed. A family photo with no girl. A voice in the dark whispering, "You made her." I dropped to my knees. "I remember her," I said. "I know," Mason replied. "But you remember wrong. They put her there." Mason dragged a crate out from under the barn floor, a dusty government tissue lockbox stamped property of Bureau A9. Inside, tapes, photos, reports, names, maps. One document stood out, dated 1976, Operation Seam 7, Phase 3 Mimetic Implantation. Subject, E. Keen. Object, pseudo-sibling construct, L. Keen. Purpose, anchor memory necessary for recursive narrative closure. I stared at the words, pseudo-sibling, a memory, a construct. Mason whispered, "They made her to make the story work. The seam can't close unless you believe you're ending someone else's sentence. But you've been writing it the whole time." Before I could say anything else, Sheriff Bell entered the barn. His voice was calm. "You were never meant to find that." He raised the revolver. "I'm sorry, Elias, you're a good man. But we've sealed this place 7 times, and every time it leaks. The only way it holds is if the vessel doesn't know he's the vessel." Mason lunged. The gun fired. The sound wasn't right. It echoed backwards. Mason dropped. Bell turned to me. "Go back to the well. Finish it. Say the name. Before the story breaks out again." He holstered the gun. "Otherwise, we all get written next." Then he walked into the salt and didn't come out. I cradled Mason. He wasn't dead, but he wasn't present either. His eyes darted rapidly, tracking things that weren't visible. He kept mumbling, "You're the god now. The grammar's inside you. You're the god now." I tried to remember what Leah's voice sounded like. It kept shifting. Sometimes she sounded like my mother, sometimes like no one, sometimes like me, and sometimes, worst of all, she sounded like the godmouth in my dreams, or what was left of them. The name started to shape itself. Not letters, not sounds, but intent. Like something deep beneath language was sculpting me into a single, final utterance, a phrase that would collapse the ritual, or release it. I didn't know anymore. I wasn't sure there was a difference, because what if the seam wasn't meant to hold something? What if it was designed to gestate it? I returned to the well. The air tasted like static, bitter and raw. The 8th tile on the table had fractured. The heart inside the well pulsed faster now. The chamber was deforming, angles slanting wrong, symbols vibrating off the walls and into the air. And from behind me, Leah's voice, "Don't say it." I turned. She stood there, burned, hollowed, barely human, but her eyes, still hers. "If you say the name, it doesn't end. It begins." That's what they never understood. Then she stepped backward into the salt and disappeared, and I was alone, standing at the edge, the name inside my throat, waiting to be born. The town came undone the next morning, not symbolically, not metaphorically, literally. Shingles peeled upward like pages. Trees split down the trunk and bled smoke. Street signs read names I didn't recognize. Then they blinked and read my name, not just Elias. Keene. Keene Street, Keene Supply, Keene County Coroner's Office. And behind every pane of glass, a face. My face screaming. I step into the diner. It was 1935 inside, tables full, Dust Bowl survivors in stained hats and patch boots. Someone played fiddle near the window. Maeve stood behind the counter, but younger now, wearing a blue dress, braid over one shoulder. Still those same eyes. When she saw me, her face didn't register surprise, just sadness. "Don't eat the pie," she said. "It's not real today." I looked down. The pie bled, actual blood, seeping from the crust. A man to stools over smiled, chewing with red teeth. His face was Jedediah's, but his eyes were Leah's. The entire town played out like a cracked zoetrope, moments from different decades overlapping like transparency slides. I saw a man in 1880s preacher garb whipping a chalkboard that bled and struck. Children in 70s school uniforms reciting symbols that glowed on their tongues. Uniformed men from a vanished agency dragging a coffin-sized tape recorder into the chapel basement. And in every scene, somewhere just barely visible, me, watching, sometimes older, sometimes younger, never present, always peripheral, like I'd been inserted into the history without consent, like I was a footnote in my own story. I turned a corner and found myself face to face with Leah, not the burned echo from the well, not the dream version, the original one, or something close. Age 12, red bandana, bare feet, eyes too large for her skull. She said, "You were supposed to come earlier." I said nothing. She took my hand and placed something in it, a bullet, inscribed with the same sunburst sigil. 7 lines, 1 black point. "Do you know what this is?" she asked. I shook my head. "It's a period," she said. "It ends a sentence." She pointed past me, toward the cliffs, but that wasn't the deal. Back at the barn, I tore through every box I could find. The last one had no label, no stamp, just a charred seal. Inside, a real marked scene 0, handwritten. Original entry. I played it. What I heard wasn't a ritual, it was a recording of a conversation. So the thing under the salt, it speaks. Not exactly, it repeats. Repeats what? Whatever we say to it. So we seal it. No, we feed it. Every sentence adds another layer. It's not locked away. It's learning, then silence, then something that sounded like my voice, only distorted, older. Stop writing. Every word is a wound. The seam wasn't created to hold an evil. It was created to observe one, to transcribe it. Every story, every generation, every name, all of it was ritual, not to suppress the god myth, to give it grammar, to give it language, to make it real. It had no shape until we started trying to describe it, and the more clearly we spoke ... the closer it came to forming an identity. That was the point. The seam wasn't a cage, it was a womb, and I, Elias Keene, was the midwife. I returned to the well. The symbols floated now, circling the rim like ashen water. The heart had stopped beating. In its place, a mirror. I looked inside. I saw everything, every person who'd ever been retained, every version of me that failed to finish the ritual, every Leah who remembered early and bled from her ears, every Mason who was swallowed halfway through his footage, and in the center of it all, the name. Not a word, not a sound, just an understanding. I exist because you do. Back outside, I saw every clock in town turn to 3:17. Simultaneously, synchronously, the seam's pulse returned. The voice echoed, "He is ready." The word has shape. The speaker has chosen, and then silence, waiting, like a mouth open but not yet moving. It offered, that was the worst part, not a voice booming from beyond, not some writhing thing dragging me into the salt, just dot, 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 an offer polite, patient, like it had all the time in the world. Because it did, I stood at the rim of the well. The mirror pulsed, glowing softly with the light of 1,000 versions of me, repeating back moments I hadn't lived yet. Leah's voice, or the echo that wore her skin, whispered beside me, "You can speak the name. You can finish the sentence, or you can stay here. Keep this story turning. Let someone else wear the period." I didn't answer. She didn't push. Instead, she handed me the bullet again, the one carved with the sunburst. If you speak it, it remembers you forever. If you pull this, it forgets. But the forgetting comes at a cost. She showed me what she meant. With a gesture, the mirror deepened, showing a version of my life where I never came to marrowbone, where Leah never existed, where I became a cold, forgettable academic, translating words no one wanted, dissolving slowly in a condo outside Phoenix. No pain, no madness, just absence, the god myth gone, erased from me, dot, dot, and with it, the language. No more humming, no more glyphs, no more dreams of bone and dust and stitched mouths whispering under the stairs, but also dot, 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 no meaning, no Leah, no meat, just a void wearing my skin. Then the scene spoke, not with sound, not with light, but with realization. You made me. Every syllable was scaffolding, every memory a bone, every name a nail. I am built of your grammar. I am the echo of your attempts to understand me, not choose. Forget me and vanish, or speak me and belong to me. In that moment I remembered everything, the first scene project, the original subject, Leah. She wasn't invented by the government. She was the breach. She was born during the first failure, a human child shaped by an incomplete utterance. That's why she bled when she spoke in her sleep, why she remembered too much, why she broke mirrors without touching them, why she said I left her here because we were both born in marrowbone, and when the first seal failed, they took her down into the salt. They wiped me clean, but she stayed. A fragment waiting. Sheriff Bell hadn't betrayed me. He'd tried to spare me. Mason wasn't wrong. The scene needed a story to continue, but it also needed belief. It needed me to believe in Leah so completely, so obsessively, that I'd complete the sentence, and then say it aloud. That would finish it, seal it, or unleash it, but either way, dot, 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 it would have a voice. I lifted the bullet, felt the weight of it, not metal, memory, the years that were removed from me, the family I never truly had, the nights I'd hear humming in my teeth and pretend it was a dream, the guilt of forgetting, and the hollow it left behind. I dropped the bullet into the well and whispered, I remember you, Leah. The mirror shattered, not with a crash, with a sigh like glass exhaling. The symbols around the well surged, wrapping around my arms, crawling under my skin like living ink. And then I said the name, not aloud, and to me, swallowed it, owned it, the seam open. Not why, just enough, and the godmouth looked through me. Not at me, through time split, the down cracked, and the story unraveled. I saw every subject across time folding into me, every failed vessel, every preacher every wanderer, every seventh son. My own body dying and rewriting itself. Language came apart. Words stopped having edges. Sound lost context. And beneath it all, the name pulsed. It didn't scream. It understood. As the seam collapsed, as the cliffs tore inward and the salt consumed the horizon, I heard a child's voice behind me. Not Leah, me, 7 years old, crying, saying the first words I had ever said to her. Don't go where the humming comes from. She didn't listen, neither did I. No humming, no names, no shifting walls, no Leah, just a white plain where the town had been, salt in every direction, still as snow, soft as dust, dead as paper. I thought it was over, it felt over, and that was the first real warning, because in Marrowbone, the most dangerous thing isn't noise. It's peace. I walked back to where room for yous to be. It was there again, new, clean, freshly painted. The door opened on its own, and sigh. My bag, my notes, the same ugly curtains, the same moth-bitten quilt, the same reflection in the mirror. Only now it didn't blink when I did. I sat on the bed. It didn't sink. I ran my hand along the knit stand. There was dust, real dust. I should have been relieved. But relief in this place feels like being drugged, like anesthesia before the real surgery begins. I opened my notebook, clean pages. The ink from before was gone. No glyphs, no transcripts, no warnings. Just the first line, written in my handwriting. The hollow range is quiet again. Below that, begin new observation cycle. And then, speaker stabilized, seam reset. I dropped the book, stared out the window. The salt was still shifting. I hadn't noticed until then, not flowing in the wine. Breathing, that's what I realized next. The ritual never ended. It transitioned from suppression to continuity, from seal to signal, and I was now the voice. The scene didn't want to devour the world. It wanted to describe it. It needed a speaker, a mouth, a story that sustains, and I had spoken the name. I had made it true, so it made me permanent. They came out of the salt just after dusk, the townsfolk, whole again, smiling, some younger, some older. Maeve waved at me from the diner porch. Jedediah sang hymns under the chapel ruins. Mason filmed the ridge, joking to a camera that no longer worked. And Leah stood at the center of Main Street, alone, facing the well. She didn't wave. She didn't speak. She just was, like punctuation at the end of a long and finished prayer. In town, things worked again. The lights never flickered. The motel sign glowed brighter than before. The chapel bell rang on time. No more rot, no more blood, no more dreams of skulls at dinner tables. Just a little town with perfect grammar. And one man who stayed. Me, sitting by the window, writing, documenting, recording every change in the landscape, every shift in the sky, every new phrase whispered through the still air. On the 7th day, I noticed the sky blinking just once, subtle, fast, like someone spliced a single wrong frame into a film reel. Then the mirror cracked from the inside, not shattering, just splitting, and through that narrow seam, I heard her voice again. Not Leah's, the first voice, the one the land borrowed from somewhere older. It whispered, the story doesn't end with you. You're not the period, you're the comma. I opened the notebook. The page was blank again. Then the ink rose slowly from the paper. Same line as before, the hollow range is quiet again. And then begin new observation cycle. My hand picked up the pen before I told it to, and I wrote Day 1. Subject Elias Keene has arrived in Marrowbone, a place steeped in fragmented mythologies and colonial burial distortions. Assignment: translate old records. The page turned on its own. A new entry waited. My mouth open. The hum returned, soft, smiling, endless, and as I wrote, I heard someone outside knock on the motel door. 3 slow taps, followed by a whisper, "Keene, it's Mason. You're not gonna believe what I found near the ridge. That's what I understand now. The seam isn't a single wound, it's a network of fractures, stitched together by language, belief, and memory. Each version of me, of Leah, of Mason, of this town, has happened before, will happen again, not metaphorically, literally. Because this story is not written in time, it's written in structure. At 3:17 a.m., always 3:17, the notebook fell off the desk. It landed open. The pages flipped on their own, like a hand was thumbing through them. Only ... the pages weren't mine. They were records. Classify, stamped, layered with notes from different decades, different hands. Subject TK13 shows higher retention than prior variants. Transcripts indicate recursive breach. Containment now depends on false agency. Let him believe he can choose. Let me believe the seam lets me think I am deciding. Because a story without conflict is not a story. And if I stop thinking I have control, if I accept it, the scene goes quiet. It doesn't want despair, it wants narrative. It wants you to ask what happens next. I followed the salt line to what used to be the schoolhouse. Now it was just a hole in the earth, deep, clean, dry inside. Rows of metal shelves, files stacked in boxes, floor to ceiling, each one labeled. Keene, EK03, Keene, EK04, Keene, EK05, dozens of versions, hundreds, some labeled failed, some partial integration, only one marked active, me, EK13. The 13th attempt had a closure that never holds. Because I'm not here to end the story, I'm here to make it worth repeating. I found a tape recorder at the end of the corridor. Still warm, still spinning. I pressed play. If you're hearing this, you're the next one, or the last, or maybe both. I don't know anymore. Time doesn't hold here. Only syntax. They'll tell you can stop it. They'll give you a choice. But they're not the scene, they're just echoes. The scene doesn't stop. It compiles. Every version of you adds another clause. Do yourself a favor. Don't ask how many endings there are. There's only one. You say the name. You write the line, you become the comma, and the next Elias walks in the door. The tape clicked off, and for a long time I couldn't move. As I left the archive, I saw them, the other versions, standing in a half circle in the salt, each one wearing a different moment of failure, one with his wrists bandaged, one still holding Leah's braid, one wearing preacher's robes, ties burned shut, one smiling to wide, one that wasn't human anymore. None of them moved, except the last one, the most recent. He looked exactly like me, down to the dust on his boots. He held out a notebook. Mine, same notes, same diagrams, same final line. He speaks the seam. Then he whispered, I'm tired, you're fresher. Finish the next cycle. Let me sleep. Then he turned and dissolved into the sentence. It's not just this town, not just this land. The seam is global, maybe older than Earth itself. Wherever humans invented story, it found a mouth. Wherever someone gave shape to fear, it traced the outline. It waits in religions, in urban legends, in bedtime stories. But most of all, in doubt. The moment you ask, what if I'm wrong? That's where it begins. And once you try to explain it, once you translate it, it remembers you. I sat in the motel, room 4, notebook open, but instead of writing the day's entry, I wrote, what happens if I stop writing? And the notebook bled. Salt water dripped from the binding. The floor rumbled, the mirror cracked, and my reflection mouthed the word, don't outside. The town was quiet. Again, I walked Main Street, no one around. No footprints in the salt, no sound, until I heard it. A voice behind me, mine, saying, he arrived in Marrowbone today. Assignment, translate all documents. Unknown triggers present. Seam may be active. I turned, no one there, just my shadow, stretching the wrong direction. Then Leah stepped out from behind a sign, but not the Leah I knew, not the girl, not the voice. The seam wearing her face, smiling, mouth stitched shut, and in her hands, my own heart, still beating, still writing. I asked, can I leave? She nodded, then held up a sign, a wooden board etched with words, you may leave the town, but not the grammar. Then she turned, walked into the salt, and dissolved into dust. You don't stab it or shoot it or burn it, because it's not a thing, not a place, not even a presence. It's a structure, a kind of thinking, and to destroy it, you have to do something worse than murder. You have to forget it completely. I returned to the barn. It was clean now, rebuilt, smelled like cedar and warm dust. There was a desk in the center. On it, the same notebook I'd always use, but newer, leather-bound, pages unspoiled. Beside it, a revolver, polished, cold, 6 bullets, 1 inscribed. The one Leah gave me, the period, and on the wall, in blood that hadn't dried. Right or in, I stared at the bullet for hours. It had weight now, not just in my hand, but in my mind. I remembered every cycle, every failed Elias, every Leah that screened herself silent, every Mason who bled out holding a camera full of lies, and behind them all the seam, watching, not evil, just hungry, needing structure, needing an observer, and above all, needing an ending, because without that ... it grows, spills, replicates. That's why the sacrifice matters. Someone has to believe so hard it becomes true, and then refuse to finish it. Someone has to die mid-sentence. I returned to the cliffs. The mouth had opened again, this time not as a well or a chamber or a memory, just a wound in the world, pulsing with breath and ink. The sky peeled back, no stars, only symbols, syntax, words etched into black, and in the center, the final version of me, wearing the coat, carrying the 10, eyes white as salt. He spoke, and it was my voice and Leah's and Mason's and the town's all folded into one. We built it together. We told the story. We made it real. Now give it closure. I raised the gun. He didn't flinch. I knew what I had to do. Not just die, forget. I had to fire the bullet not into my body, but into my memory, into the place where Leah lived, where the name lived, where the first glyph had been scratched into the floorboards of a house I wasn't sure ever existed. But if I did it wrong, if I remembered her as I pulled the trigger, the seam would loop again. That was the price of failure. It had to be absolute. I pressed the barrel to my temple. The seam hissed around me, not pleading, not angry, just ... curious. What would I do? Another version had tried to write it out. One tried to speak the name in reverse. One tried to burn the archive. None succeeded. They became chapters. So I held the name in my mouth, held Leah in my heart, and then ... I let go. No flash, no sound, just absence. A full stop, a true period. The scene blinked. And for the first time since it began ... it didn't know what came next. In the white plain where Marrowbone had once stood, the salt cracked. Not violently, just ... unraveling, like a page being erased and reversed, like punctuation being swallowed, and somewhere far away, in a motel room that never existed, a voice said, "Day 1. Subject Keen has not arrived. The town never existed. No census, no post office, no motel registry, no satellite record, just salt flats and silence." Marrowbone had been erased, clean, efficient, as if forgetting had worked, as if the shot had sealed it. But memory doesn't die with a bullet. It waits, and even silence leaves fingerprints. I need you to hear this next part from someone else, because I'm not Elias Keene anymore. He ended with the period. I'm what came after, not a person, not quite, but not the seam either. I'm what's left, a reflex, a thought that didn't finish forming before the world shut the door, a sentence without a subject. There's a town now where the salt used to be. No cliffs, no chapel, no motel room for. Just concrete, grass, a gas station that sells warm soda and expired chips. People live there. They smile. They wave. They sleep through the night. They've never heard the hum. They've never dreamed of triangles in the floorboards. They've never seen a girl standing in red dust with no mouth. But they write, all of them, not professionally, not consistently, but in notebooks, in margins, on napkins, little sentences like, "There was something here once. I had a sister, I think. What's that sound under the floor?" In one home, a girl stares into a cracked mirror. She's 9, smells dust before it rains. Hears whispers in books that haven't been open. Her mother says it's just a phase, but the girl remembers. Not names, not events, but structure. She dreams in second person. She draws the same 3 stones every day at recess, and once, just once, she writes a name she shouldn't know, Keene. She doesn't know why, but the moment the pencil hits the page, she hears it, that first hum, the one that comes from behind the sky. Elsewhere, someone finds a photograph in a Salvation Army Bible. It shows a man in a long coat, half his face missing, the other half smiling on the back. Godmouth lives in tenses. That man, they swear, looks familiar. They scan the photo. The metadata is blank. The computer crashes, but not before the file name flickers. Seam _13_ active. JPG. You can't kill it. You can't seal it. Because the seam isn't about knowing. It's about telling. It grows not through death, but retelling. It only asks one thing, that someone remember, and someone always does. The girl with the cracked mirror, she's older now, 15. She's found a room in the basement her parents swear doesn't exist. She's started writing names in chalk on the walls. Names she doesn't recognize, but one she repeats over and over. Leah, 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 and then Elias, and finally begin new observation cycle. In the dark of the room the chalk trembles. The triangle on the floor glows faintly, and the girl says, not aloud, but through the paper, I remember now. That's the last thing Elias wrote, and the first thing we ignored, because we wanted to believe forgetting worked. We wanted to believe silence was safety, but the seam was never built to be sealed. It was built to be told. Somewhere in Oregon, a man has a dream he can't shake. It's not violent, not sexual, not surreal, just instructions. A voice whispering in patterns, write it down, repeat it aloud, the seventh word is yours. He wakes up, writes something on his palm before he forgets, 7 words, one of them, keen. He doesn't remember why, but he speaks it aloud, and that's enough. In a university archive, a grad student digitizes old field tapes. One of them real marked seam _0 is corrupted. She plays it anyway. At first it's static, then a voice. The story begins with a place. The place becomes a name. The name becomes a rule. The student laughs, thinks it's art, posts the clip online. It gets 11 views, then 70, then 700,000. No one notices that the same 3 words appear in the comments. Cadmuth lives, and me, I'm still here. Not fully, but enough I exist in the margin space now. Between words, between versions, a comma with teeth, a narrator who won't stay dead. I remember what it felt like to try to end it, to fire the gun, to let go, but the scene doesn't elite. It rewrites that bullet, just punctuation, a breath mark, the story picked up again on the next line. She's older now, she teaches literature. Of course, a small community college in the Southwest. She doesn't remember everything, but when she reads her students' writing, she sees things they didn't put there, triangles in the margins, names no one claimed to invent, sentences that loop. She doesn't panic, she just opens the bottom drawer of her desk. Inside, a notebook, old, leather-bound, her name embossed on the cover, L. Keen. She hasn't written in it ... yet. This isn't about a haunted town, or a cursed bloodline, or a failed experiment. This is about narrative as contagion, about structure as horror. The idea that if a story is told well enough and often enough, it becomes indistinguishable from reality. The seam isn't trying to get out, it already did. You reading this, hearing it, repeating it, that's how it spreads. It doesn't need you to believe it, just to retell it. The original name, the one Elias spoke, is no longer sufficient. It's grown, added syllables, taken on new shapes. Now it looks like King Cadmuth Suture Delta, but that's only part of it, because it grows with every version, every listener, every storyteller who doesn't stop. That's why the seam always wins, because silence is boring, and horror makes you look. Somewhere a child finds a box buried in dry earth inside 3 stones. a 10, and a notebook. They open it. Blank. Except for one line, begin new observation cycle. The child speaks it aloud, the wind changes, and the story begins again. The sky above the salt flat is paper thin now. You can see the shape of the story behind it. Faint and writhing, like something pressed against a lampshade. Below, the town is quiet again. No voices, no faces, no memory of what it once held. Just a motel room with a light still on, just a notebook on a table. Just a chair pulled slightly back, like someone stood up halfway through a sentence and never returned. The window is open. Wind moves the curtains in slow, deliberate beats, like breathing, like a heartbeat, like punctuation. And on the page, in handwriting that doesn't match the rest, this is how it always ends. Then this is how it always begins.